me. I'm pretty excited to be talking to you guys about Aussie birds, or Aussie broads, and what it means to be a female in Australia right now. To contextualise this presentation, which is actually part of a big exploratory mission which we're only just beginning to understand who the Australian female is, we are launching a women's channel. Vice is launching a women's channel in Q3 this year called Broadly. I'm going to show you a snippet of the reel that, about the channel, which I cropped at the end, so excuse the bad editing. But that kind of set us off on this journey to understand who is the Australian female, the young Australian female.
We teach girls to shrink themselves, to make themselves smaller. We say to girls, you can have ambition, but not too much.
Women make up half the world's population, with a spending power of $7 trillion a year. The female experience isn't a niche, it's an identity, and young women are sick of being marginalised. In fact, 91% of women are dissatisfied with the way that brands and the media talk to them.
Is she doing more harm than good for the kids? Doesn't she have a responsibility, this woman?
Millennial women are smart and well-educated, and they're tired of having their concerns reduced to a series of knee-jerk reactions and celebrity gossip.
And I'm sorry that we live in a culture that commodifies sexuality of unwilling participants.
I just like, do you do that to the guys?
Introducing Broadly.
I even believe that a woman is more powerful than men.
Vice's newest channel that is devoted entirely to covering the issues that matter the most to women.
It's our time to have equal rights for women.
Cool, so that's just a snippet of what will be one of Vice's most exciting channels. We've already launched it globally, and without us doing anything in Australia, we're seeing nearly 500,000 newbies in Australia. So there's obviously a massive appetite for this kind of content, and there's really no one exploring what is new femininity to millennials. So I think it's pretty clear when we look at what's happening in the world that the times they are changing. Globally, Hillary Clinton looks set to become America's first female president. Angela Merkel is not only the Chancellor of Germany, but arguably mother hen of the whole of the EU. Sheryl Sandberg started Lean In and is the head of Facebook, CEO. Marissa Mayer of Yahoo. These traditional bastions of male culture, politics and technology are finally being fronted by strong and resilient women. And in Australia, we're seeing the same. This gender agenda is really getting pushed from above. Women in Australia now out-earn and outlive men at a rate of about 1.6 to 1. And the first thing our new Prime Minister did when he came into office is not the innovation agenda, it was actually push domestic violence as his main message. So women are definitely coming to the fore. And when we look at our Australians of the Year, again, we see that there's this gendered agenda happening. Rosie Batty, last year's Australian of the Year, anti-domestic violence campaigner, or 3 out of the 5 Australian of the Year nominees for this year, all pushing gender. From General David Morrison, who said, discrimination is not acceptable and you're a coward if you think it's okay within the Australian Army, to Elizabeth Broderick, our Sex Discrimination Commissioner, and Catherine McGregor, a trans icon and former Army General. Great, all this stuff's happening. We've obviously got a pretty large feminism agenda, but the one thing I think we can all see is that all of this change is being driven by the boomers. Is that a concern? I'd argue probably yes. So what's happening with our next generation, the young, powerful women who actually make up, as a generation, 27% of the Australian population? Because millennials are really going to drive the agenda from above and from below, and so far we're not hearing much from them in Australia. Globally, young women are really leading the charge. Pop culture icons are now much more than just pop stars. It's Emma Watson fronting up the UN's He for She program. It's Malala Yousafzai confronting gender norms. The list goes on and on about these strong, powerful young women changing the agenda. Charlize Theron fronting up Mad Max. List goes on and on. So we set out on a little exploratory mission to ask young Australian females, Who's the face of our generation in Australia then? Because when we were in editorial meetings, we were drawing a blank. And if I ask any of you, who's the female face of our generation, I'd be interested to hear what you say. Here's a few of the responses. I remember when we moved to Australia at the end of '99 and Kathy Freeman won a gold. She was everywhere. She made me feel okay to be Filipino, be damn good at what you do. It doesn't matter if you're brown or have a vagina. I can't think of anyone like that now. Or, Amy, we don't have a cohesive face. It's fractured. It's in parts. We have an identity crisis. We don't have those big sports stars or celebrities, RN, you speak for right now. 92% of our nearly 1,000 respondents said there isn't a face. There's no female face of a generation in Australia for arguably the first time ever. And that might be because the internet's democratised our heroes, or it could be a major, major cause for concern when we think about how accessible these other young women changing the agenda are from other parts of the world. That's not to say we don't have heroes. We have quite a lot of them, like Melanie Perkins, the founder of Canva, who's being courted by Google right now, and arguably one of Australia's most successful tech entrepreneurs, or Turia Pitt, this marathon runner who fronted the face of yet another boomer publication, Women's Weekly. But our young women aren't cognizant of these women's achievements. So are we a faceless generation? Do we have no icons overall, these pop culture heroes? We asked another question because we were pretty concerned about the lack of Australian icons. Okay, who then is the face of our generation? Surely that's going to deliver some pretty great results. That's where we'll see Sheryl Sandberg. That's where we'll see Marissa Mayer pop up. 61% of our respondents, which is fairly crazy, said Kimmy K. And 29 said Tay-Tay. The other responses were equally as driven by pop culture. And all our respondents said, shit, that's pretty disappointing, isn't it? They all had that same response. I feel bad saying Kimmy K, but I think it's Kimmy K, which means that the media and us as marketers and as creatives are making accessibility the main reason why we have heroes, which I think is actually just our failing. It's by accessibility that these women are the face of a generation. But when we look at the world overall, the definition of womanhood is really changing, and quite rapidly. Looking to pop culture, whereas once a woman, in the words of Sylvia Plath, had to be poor, hairless, and white, now she's, in the words of our ID editor, and apologies, I screen grabbed this and saw a typo. So the Tumblr generation, Muse, is no longer a flawless, airbrushed A-lister, flashing her pearly whites on the cover of the September issue whilst dripping in borrowed diamonds. Today's of the model moment has dark circles under her eyes, she's makeup-free, she's gap-toothed, gangly, and uninterested in being edited into submission. And I think that's very true. When we think of Kimmy K, her book of selfies included her getting blood facials, pulling fat faces, or Tay-Tay making a mockery of traditional sexuality. Now a woman in pop culture is brash, she's crass, she's fierce, she's hairy, which is actually one of the most interesting trends we're starting to see in high fashion. The growth of armpit hair is an act of bodily resistance. She's flawed like Lena Dunham, just embracing the awkward, dishevelled fuck-up of what it's like to be young and celebrating that, saying this is youth, why don't we put it to the fore? She's fluid, and perhaps this is actually one of the most exciting things. Now womanhood is not even defined by your actual physical gender, so much so that amongst our 18 to 24 respondents, 61% of them said, I don't even think gender defines me. You can't define me by gender, and they elected not to tick a box. That's crazy. 61% elected not to gender identify. She's makeup-free. She's selfish, really inverting those norms of motherhood. Now I can be a sexy mum or self-obsessed and my child can sit on the side rather than defining who I am. She's wrinkled, again, one of the most interesting trends that's happening, this real fetishization of age. Now Karen Walker's major campaigns, a wrinkly woman. Celine has Joan Didion on the cover. She's everything that a woman isn't meant to be. She's violent, like Ronda Rousey, strong instead of sexy, which is one of the most watched sports matches of last year. She's defiant. And most interestingly, this is one of the biggest trends we're seeing out of our research so far, she's a collective. Whereas on the covers of Vogue and Vice and ID before, you saw single women, perfect women who were flawless and airbrushed. Now you see collectives. Now it's squads of women. So much so that the fastest rising hashtag on social media is hashtag squad goals. The crew really has become and defines you. And I don't think we have really caught up to it yet. When we look at marketing and what's happening in advertising, it's still those old images of perfect beauty and very, very whitewashed, at least in Australia. The rest of the world has kind of cottoned on to the fact that femininity really doesn't have a definition anymore. It's whatever the fuck you want it to be. Barbie last week announcing that they're releasing a whole range of dolls to show the diversity of a woman's body, including chubby, small, fat, thin, tall, and everything in between. A whole bunch of ads globally are celebrating this new redefined femininity. I jiggle, therefore I am, embracing fatness as fine and okay, and if you don't accept it, fuck you. Or Under Armour, who in the space of 4 years has beaten out Adidas as the world's second largest sportswear company now by using resistance as a mode to sell. The list goes on and on about these collective brands pushing femininity and redefining what it means to be female. But I think we can all see that while culture has moved ahead, Australia is desperately lagging behind. And if I ask any of you, who is the brand that's really pushing this new feminist agenda, this redefinitional debate that's happening everywhere, no one can name an Australian brand that's doing that, which is arguably the failings of us as creatives to not catch up with the fact that culture is radically moving ahead of us. This is Andre Pajic, who's a transgender male model. He's one of the hottest models globally right now. This is him fronting Gucci's latest campaign. He's a ubiquitous name in the fashion scene, and yet when I mention him in Australia, fairly unknown. We have an issue here where we cut down our tall poppies, our exemplary women, just as they're about to get big. In Vice, we are having a massive discussion at the moment about the fact that girls get tired. We can't report on Discount Universe anymore because too many people are, rather than what we were seeing in the early 2000s, where we were celebrating women and making sure they were getting pushed to the front of our global agenda as our face. We're really struggling to keep up. The news is a pretty big testament to this right now. It's not just in culture, it's across the board that we're cutting down women and only talking about them when they're failing or we're re-victimizing them. Our most successful soccer team is the Matildas, and yet they were lining up for the doll. Our most successful cricket team is women, and yet they were also lining up for the doll. In Gamergate, women, technology, we should be talking about Melanie Perkins, but what gets to the fore is aggressive males attacking our gamers, or perhaps the most damning indictment of them all, whilst the world is celebrating Hillary Clinton and Angela Merkel, our ex-Prime Minister, when Julia Gillard was in power, was using Ditch the Witch as one of his main messaging. What the fuck's going on when we're celebrating this kind of antagonistic marketing rather than a celebration of that redefinition? We are still stuck in this world where girls like fashion, films, and music, and that means our heroes and who we market to also needs to be reflected. And that made a lot of sense to us. When we think about our old icons, Elle Macpherson, Kylie Minogue, Beck Hewitt, they all fitted within those three big categories of accessible culture. In the last 2 years, we're seeing a pretty radical redefinition of what a celebrity is and who we use as idols. When we asked girls 2 years ago, what girls being 18 to 34-year-olds, would a celebrity influence your decision to purchase a product? 1 in 3 said, yeah. Star power really did work then. Big names, beautiful bodies, fronting campaigns, move product. In the space of 2 years, that's decreased to negative 78%. We've all cottoned on to Lindsay Lohan-like people on Instagram shilling celebrity slimming tea, and now celebrity, as we traditionally defined it, really doesn't resonate with us anymore. So much so that we're actually retreating away from those traditional areas that we found our heroes. When we asked, how's your spending changing? Sport, music, and movies, the three bastions or areas for celebrity culture, also are seeing the largest decline. We're moving away from big experiences with big accessible heroes at a rate that's fairly startling and also very frightening for us. Now we have a very fluid and interchangeable sense of identity. So whereas once we would have emulated pop stars for our dress or what we listened to, now hello, my fonts have gone awful there. Now we have subcultures rising from the bottom up for really the first time ever, and then pop stars emulating what's actually happening in culture. So young women are driving the agenda rather than us emulating from below. At the moment, I'll just go through some subcultures because everyone loves it when they're like, oh, did you know about bush trolls? So of my favourite subcultures happening in Sydney and Melbourne right now, there's sea punks with blue hair, kind of like Katy Perry. There's bush trolls or psy-trances who wear bindies and look a lot like hippies. There's the normcore girls who wear Acme. There's the ghetto goths like Eka Vandal in Melbourne or FKA Twigs, Rihanna. There's the health goths like Alice in Wonderland. There's the PC music girls who haunt Tumblr with Poms jewellery and a kind of pseudo-Japanese aesthetic. And there's the new lads, who are the girls who accompany the guys in the bucket hats, skivvies. You're not quite sure if they're out to roll you or ask you where the latest cold drip coffee joint is. But the interesting thing about all these fairly remarkable subcultures is that I can be one day and a completely different one the next. Now what I look like and the pop culture heroes I identify with don't define who I am. And whereas we used to be able to say what you dress like and what you listen to defined you are a punk, I know everything you stand for, or you are into Britney Spears, I know who you are and your interests. Now our definition of self is far, far more fluid. So much so that 68% of them can't be defined by one genre. That's never happened before. What kind of music do you listen to draws a complete blank, much like who is your hero or who is the face of our generation. The internet really has democratized taste. And we've seen this change from having things, which is still how we in Australia market to girls, like this. Don't know how to make that play, so I'll just...
Yeah, but see, there's a difference between like and love. Because I like my Skechers, but I love my Prada backpack.
Which was, I think we all are familiar with that clip, but really how we think of young women to having our interests define us. Now, Isabel sums it up pretty nicely. I work at a cafe, I'm also at acting school part-time, learning to cook. I'm going to start a photography site by this German site I saw. I've gotten really into food. I'm a bit of an amateur expert on everything. Everyone is. Now it's not enough to just look the part or emulate a celebrity. You have to have a lot of substance to be any worth. So much so that 78% of our respondents said it's more important to be well-rounded than wealthy. It's not enough to just be Beyonce with a singing career. She also needs to be a clothes designer, know how to cook, or Gwyneth Paltrow with her food blogs. Now your definition of self needs to be way, way more multifaceted than just looking the part. But because they're not finding heroes in, time's up. Because they're not finding their heroes in the media or in creative campaigns, they're looking to home to find it. We're seeing the shift from celebrity, which is people I aspire but could never be, to influencers, who are people like me, who I definitely could be. Now it's not enough to just be born with it, you have to learn it. So skills are incredibly important. You have to be desired and admired. And industry's catching up with the introduction of things like the Cannes Glass Lion, celebrating this new multifaceted definition of what it's like to be female.
Hi, Erin.
This is like a girl, which I can't show you, and I all hope you're familiar with, but the basis of it is this, When did doing something like a girl become an insult? And the rest of the world is using this to motivate how we market and explore femininity. But for some reason in Australia, we're too frightened to confront this question. Femininity was this, and arguably still is this in a lot of your minds. Beautiful women, perhaps with a bit of underarm hair as a symbol of resistance. And now it's whatever the fuck you want it to be. Found out she's my cousin the other day. I was like, what? So no more of this, which is demographic segmentations, conflicted copers, main grocery buyers, girls just like music, film and fashion, and more of this. Questioning what it's like and what it means to do something like a girl, because like a girl is the most exciting concept at the moment. Yeah, it's about time we caught up.